got barbecue back there, and you didn't invite me. Hurt my feelings.
Welcome back into the channel, another Destination Dynasty quick hit episode. If you have not already, check out ddfantasyfootball.com. Get access to the war tool that you see up there on the screen. Run the war, calculate the war for your specific league, and dominate your Dynasty leagues with the war tool over at ddfantasyfootball.com. Also access to the Trinity tool, so check it out if you haven't already. And if you could, like and subscribe to the channel here. We're trying to grow this DDFFB. Hit me up in the comments. Let me know if there's any future videos or topics that you want me to cover. And this is going to be a follow-up. The last episode I did on DD Quick Hits was talking about 5 running back buys plus a bonus that I wanted to buy in Dynasty based on their 2024 efficiency. And that was a follow-up to a podcast that I did on DD Radio talking about the 2024 efficiency report. So go back, listen to that. Check out the first episode, and today's episode is going to be the 5 running backs and a bonus. So call it 6 running backs that I want to sell based on their 2024 efficiency and their current market. So let's get right into it. First one is Jonathan Taylor. As you can see, he is the RB7 in Dynasty per keep trade cut. And looking at his opportunities and what he did with them, and let me take a step back and define what I mean by opportunities. I use rush attempts plus targets. That's defined as an opportunity. In 2024, a target was worth 2.45 times what a rush attempt was. So obviously, you want players with a lot of opportunity, but you want players that are also getting their lots of opportunity in the form of targets more than rush attempts. So Jonathan Taylor, he's a bell cow. He's a workhorse. If you are interested in him, it's for that reason. He averaged 23.9 opportunities a game. So he's getting more opportunity than almost anybody. But if you look at what he did with it, he was 61st in PPR points per opportunity. He was 54th if you take out the touchdowns. So maybe a little touchdown regression positively for Jonathan Taylor, but not much. It's not like, oh, if he would have scored more touchdowns, he would have absolutely smashed. He was 61st in target rate. So the Anthony Richardson offense is not targeting Jonathan Taylor. They're not targeting the running backs, period. But Jonathan Taylor is the main asset in the backfield, and here's where he stands. So basically, and you're going to notice a theme with most of these, they are opportunity bets. You are betting on Jonathan Taylor, and you are just basing that bet on the fact that you hope he's going to get the same opportunity and maybe even more than he did in 2024. He's RB7. Now, the thing that a lot of people are probably going to put in the comments is, what can I sell running backs for? Like Jonathan Taylor is probably one of the few running backs in Dynasty you might actually be able to sell. As we start getting into this list, you're going to go, well, I can't really sell that guy for anything. In fact, there's probably some of these players that, although I don't want them probably what it's going to cost me, the what it's going to cost me is someone else I'm thinking is going to overcharge me for the opportunity. But there's going to be a range of players where you go, nobody's actually buying these players. So just keep that in mind. If you're looking at similar players in these tiers, I would prefer not to have the ones that I'm going to talk about today, but also understand that the running back market, once you get to a certain range, is not very robust at all. Next up, we have Kyren Williams. So Kyren Williams is right behind Jonathan Taylor at RB8 in Dynasty, 4th last year in opportunities per game. But if you look at what he did with it, he was 32nd in PPR points per opportunity, 59th when you take away the touchdowns. So when you see the high number on the left in tab number 2, 32nd in points per opportunity, but 59th when you remove the touchdowns, that tells me he was carried very much so on touchdowns. So if you want to make that a bet again, and I think I'm probably way more apprehensive about betting on Kyren Williams being 4th in the league again in opportunities when his efficiency dropped so drastically from 2023 to 2024. If you recall this content in 2023, Kyren Williams was amazingly efficient on a workload that nobody thought he'd be able to sustain. And that was one of the reasons why you could have maybe bought back into him, that even if his workload went down, which it didn't, he still was good enough to maintain his production. But this year, the production tanked. Take away the touchdowns, and he was pretty bad. And I forgot to mention this. I'm basing this off of a sample size of guys that got at least 50 opportunities. So the sample size is 86 running backs in 2024. So these numbers are out of 86. And he was 59th when you remove the touchdowns. He doesn't get targeted either. 56th in target rate. So really, I'm looking at him going, touchdown regression is probably going to go negatively. And he still wasn't an efficient running back. Does that mean his opportunity is going to go down? Who knows? But just not a player I want to bet on at RB8. Next up, we've got Brian Robinson. He is RB19 in Dynasty per keep trade cut. 29th in opportunities per game last year. So not as big a workload as Brian Robinson had the year before. Maybe it was a little bit the fact that they had a new offense, right? Jaden Daniels was there. That's a huge component of their offense that was not there the year prior. But then you look at what he did with the opportunities. Sure, he got less opportunity, but I'd be looking for him to go, he did more with it, right? That's the concern here. Not only did his opportunity fall to 29th, but his efficiency really didn't get boosted to where he can go, you know what? Just give me more opportunity and I'll give you more out of it, right? He was 37th in points per opportunity. He was 53rd when you remove the touchdowns. So again, another guy like Kyren Williams that was dependent on touchdowns, but also concerning because there's a world where Washington brings in another running back, which I do think a lot of teams are going to. I'm going to get a lot of questions in the comments. Oh, well, what if this team takes a running back? I expect 75% of teams to take a running back. Now, not all of them are going to take one with the draft capital or the pedigree where you're really worried for a guy like Brian Robinson, but these numbers kind of smell to me like he doesn't deserve more opportunity. And when his opportunity is dropping from the year before, that's where he becomes an even bigger concern to me than somebody like Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor wasn't good with his opportunity, but it's hard to bet that he's just going to go from second to 30th. But Brian Robinson at 29th, and I get it. He was banged up, so maybe that played into it a little bit. Doesn't get targeted. He was 55th in target rate. But as you can see, the numbers show that if he didn't score those touchdowns, he would have been even less impressive in 2024 than he was. So at RB19, listen, if he was RB30, I would say, give me some Brian Robinson and just bet the fact that they run it back in the backfield. And if that's the case, then I'll bet on him again. But given there's probably some draft risk there, I don't want to pay anywhere close to RB19. He's probably more in the range of some of the guys that I'm going to share here next, even though he's valued higher. Next up, we have Tank Bigsby. Surprisingly, RB29 in Dynasty. Think about that. RB29. And you probably couldn't have had a player that has a different perception from what people think he did to what he actually did. So he was 39th in opportunities per game. Okay, it's a backup running back, right? With some games where he started, which is exactly what he was. He was 41st in points per opportunity, 62nd when you remove the touchdowns. So talk about a guy that is entirely dependent on touchdowns because his opportunity isn't even starter level, right? It's 39th out of 86, and he's entirely dependent on touchdowns. Without touchdowns, he was at the very, very bottom. And let me say this because I forgot to mention, there's only 68 running backs that actually qualified for, I guess you would call it a per opportunity per game of like 5 or more. So it's an even smaller sample size that I'm pulling these from. None of the players I'm talking about were part of the big 86. So out of 68 running backs, he's 62nd in adjusted opportunity. So right there, he's not doing anything unless he's scoring touchdowns. His target rate is abysmal, 65th out of 68. So right there, like he's at the bottom in both doing anything besides getting touchdowns and doing anything in the passing game. Now, I think people are still maybe buying into him because they have Liam Cohen and the perception is that he's the starter. But I think if there's a team that drafts a running back this year and also has 2 running backs with ETN and Tank Bigsby that are still valued inside like the top 30, it's going to be a backfield where on the last video, I talked about Rachaad White and talked about how good the Buccaneers backfield was last year with Liam Cohen. If that same logic applies to Jacksonville, you may have 3 guys here that you're trying to decipher if they draft a meaningful rookie, and Tank Bigsby will clearly be at the very bottom for me based on these numbers. Number 5, Audric Estime. So out of 68, 63rd in opportunities per game. Okay, yeah, he was a backup running back. But I talked about Javonte Williams on the last video. Javonte Williams was way better than Audric Estime. Even though Audric Estime did not have nearly the number of opportunities or touches, on a per basis, he was terrible. Look at these numbers. 63rd in both touchdown adjusted opportunity and overall opportunity with PPR points per. 63rd out of 68 in both. So he basically got what he should have got. But then 67th in target rate. So a 0 in the passing game. So I know Javonte Williams is going to move on, but what this tells me is at RB 44 price, as soon as Javonte leaves in free agency, which he's going to, and then his name's going to be out there as a guy going to a new team, and Audric Estime is going to be seen, even if it's just for a week, 2-week long window. Oh man, he could be the starter. Because Denver could sign another running back too. They could bring in another equivalent, maybe not as good as Javonte Williams, but they could bring in somebody else. But they're definitely going to bring in somebody in the draft. So there's going to be a window where Estime, I'm not saying he's going to get souped up or pump up to like RB 30, but it's going to be a strong RB 40, RB 38, where someone goes, ooh, he could be the starter. I'll take the bet. I'm not taking the bet. He was terrible with his opportunity. He doesn't really have the pedigree that makes any promises given to him in terms of opportunity next year. And that's just an automatic sell for me. If people see, even he's like the Zamir White of last year, right? But probably, to be truthful, like worse than Zamir White, because Zamir White's been in the league a couple years. Estime was this bad as a rookie. So just not very promising for him going forward, especially if there becomes a sell window. And then the bonus, Nick Chubb. People don't want to hear this. And I was surprised to see that he was RB 54 on KTC, which means the market, I think, is adjusting to the fact that he's not going to come back to Cleveland, which, given how bad their run game was last year, how bad their offense was, probably isn't a bad thing if you are hoping for his value to bounce back. Someone's going to be more excited if he goes somewhere else rather than back to Cleveland. But RB 54, so in terms of, I think, his current market, a lot of people are going to feel, well, I'll just hold on to him and see what happens. But let's look a little deeper into his numbers. And you see, when you see those 60s in there, you know that's not good from watching these last two videos. So 32nd in opportunities per game. When he came back, he got pretty regular work. But here was the problem. With his 14.5 opportunities per game, 66th out of 68 in points per opportunity. 67 out of 68 when you take away the touchdowns. And 60th in target rate. So basically everything is in like the bottom 5 to 10% of the league. And when I see those numbers, I go, man, I know the Browns were bad. So maybe I can excuse a little bit of a way because of the fact he was on that team. But he still had the 32nd highest opportunities per game. But then if you recall the last video, Jerome Ford in the same backfield, in the same situation, was great. So Jerome Ford had slightly lesser opportunity per game, but pretty close. Like it was in the double figures. But he was so much better on those opportunities. It tells me the Browns are probably going to say, we're not paying Nick Chubb. Jerome Ford can be the Robin of our committee next year, and maybe they bring in another guy comparable, but it's definitely not Nick Chubb. If I didn't see Jerome Ford in the same backfield, I'd be maybe a little more apt to buy into Chubb on a new team. But this kind of just tells me he's cooked. Maybe there's a world where he comes back from the injury and he gets stronger in the offseason. I'll give him the grace on that. But given he's going to leave in free agency, he's going to go to another team. It's a guy I'm going to be able to sell based on name value as soon as that starts to pop up. And based on these numbers, he's pretty much somebody that will be gone off most of my rosters before we start the 2025 season. Probably before we start the rookie draft, because I'll have a window there after free agency where I can sell him. So those are 6 running backs to sell based on their 2024 efficiency. Go back and listen to that pod if you want to hear the whole thing. That's really just me going through the data. The DD Fantasy Radio pod feed, the episode from a couple weekends ago titled The RB Efficiency Report in 2024. Check out all the other content on the channel, the mock drafts, Dynasty Theory, all the stuff that's launching every single week. Engage with the community, like and subscribe if you haven't already, and hit me up in the comments. I'll sign off. Be chill.